Okay, so for those of you, sorry, somebody's still trying to join. Okay, so for those of you that got my email, you were sent a extract like this. For those of you that haven't or haven't had a chance to open it, it's not a problem. This is what the extract looks like, and we are going to read it as a class. It's why I haven't given it to you beforehand, because in the exam, you won't get it beforehand. You will get to read it 5 minutes before and then go straight into answering the question. So I'm a firm believer of giving it to you in real time. Okay, there's no point in giving it to you half an hour earlier. You get all the time in the world to read it, and then we read it for a second, third, fourth, fifth time together as a class, and therefore the questions are easier to answer, because that's not what this exam assesses. It assesses your reading ability and your understanding in that short period of time. I always say to my learners that if you had 1.5 hours to complete this exam, loads of you would pass with far higher grades, but the time constraint is a part of the assessment as well. So this is from a 2017 paper called The Tidiness of Rosabelle. Okay, and it's from a short story. The nice thing about paper one, as you all know, it only has one extract. So please, please, please do spend the time reading it. If you do not understand what you have read, you cannot answer the 4 questions and you cannot gain, anything above a 4. You've misunderstood basically what you've read. So this extract is from the beginning of a short story by Catherine Mansfield. It is the early 1900s, and Rosabelle, a lower class girl who works in a hat shop, is on her way home. So please always read the information in the text box as well, because it will always give you a context, a scenario for you to put the rest of this information, okay, in place. So it's written in the 1900s. It's about Rosabelle. We know back then in the 1900s, there was a big difference between classes. If you were upper class, you had a lot of advantages. If you were working class or lower class, then, it was very unlikely that you had access to an education, that you had access to money, wealth, the same freedoms and rights that the upper class people had. Okay, and this is Rosabelle, a working class girl who works in a hat shop, and she's on her way home. So we'll just read this and then we'll look at those questions. At the corner of Oxford Circus, Rosabelle bought a bunch of violets, and that was practically the reason why she had so little tea, for a scone and a boiled egg and a cup of cocoa are not sufficient after a hard day's work in a hat shop. As she swung onto the step of the bus, grabbed her skirt with one hand and clung to the railing with the other, Rosabelle thought she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner, something hot and strong and filling. Rosabelle looked out of the windows. The street was blurred and misty, but light striking on the panes turned their dullness to opal and silver, and the jewellers' shops seen through this were fairy palaces. Her feet were horribly wet, and she knew the bottom of her skirt and petticoat would be coated with black, greasy mud. There was a sickening smell of warm humanity. It seemed to be oozing out of everybody in the bus, and everybody had the same expression, sitting so still, staring in front of them. Rosabelle stirred suddenly and unfastened the top 2 buttons of her coat. She felt almost stifled. Through her half-closed eyes, the whole row of people on the opposite seat seemed to resolve into one meaningless, staring face. She began to think of all that had happened during the day. Would she ever forget that awful woman in the grey mackintosh, or the girl who had tried on every hat in the shop, and then said she would call in tomorrow and decide definitely? Rosabelle could not help smiling. The excuse was worn so thin. So you had a lot of people who were kind of like time wasters, who said they'd come back and didn't. But there had been one other, a girl with beautiful red hair and a white skin and eyes the colour of that green ribbon shot with gold that had come from Paris last week. Rosabelle had seen her carriage at the door. A man had come in with her, quite a young man, and so well dressed. "What is it exactly that I want, Harry?" she had said, as Rosabelle took the pins out of her hat, untied her veil, and gave her a hand mirror. "You must have a black hat," he answered. "A black hat with a feather that goes right around it and then round your neck and ties in a bow under your chin. And a decent-sized feather." The girl glanced at Rosabelle laughingly. "Have you any hats like that?" They had been very hard to please. Harry would demand the impossible, and Rosabelle was almost in despair. Then she remembered the big untouched box upstairs. "Oh, one moment, madam," she had said. "I think perhaps I can show you something that will please you better." She had run up breathlessly, cut the cords, scattered the tissue paper, and yes, there was the very hat. Rather large, soft, with a great curled feather and a black velvet rose, nothing else. They had been charmed. The girl had put it on and then handed it to Rosabelle. Let me see how it looks on you, she said. Rosabelle turned to the mirror and placed it on her own brown hair, then faced them. Oh, Harry, isn't it adorable? The girl cried. I must have that. She smiled again at Rosabelle. It suits you beautifully. A sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger had seized Rosabelle. She longed to throw the lovely, perishable thing in the girl's face and bent over the hat, flushing. It's exquisitely finished off inside, madam, she said. The girl swept out to her carriage and left Harry to pay and bring the box with him. I shall go straight home and put it on before I come out to lunch with you, Rosabelle heard her say. Okay, so we have got an extract here, okay, in which you have got Rosabelle, a working class girl who's working in a shop, on her way home at the end of a hard day. Okay, we know she is working class. We get hints of her limited dinner. We get the fact that she's an actual working girl. And then we get information about her day, and a specific focus, a specific zoom in on two customers, Harry and the beautiful girl with him who wanted to buy that hat. So, as we know, okay, and I'm not going to do question one with you. Read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 5. List 4 things about Rosabelle from this part of the source. Now, you must list the things from lines 1 to 5. If you don't list them from 1 to 5, you will not get the marks, okay? And we can say so much about Rosabelle. Okay, we can say she bought a bunch of violets. She had a scone, boiled egg, and cup of cocoa tea. She worked in a hat shop. She got onto a bus. She would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner, something hot and strong. She got the bus at the corner of Oxford Street. Sorry, she got the flowers at the corner of Oxford Circus. Any one of those. Okay. And they are here in this PowerPoint, which I will also email out to everyone at the end of the session so you can look at in your own time. She bought a bunch of violets. She had a scone, boiled egg, and cup of cocoa for tea. She worked in a hat shop. She had worked hard all day. She swung onto the step of the bus. She grabbed her skirt with one hand. She clung to the railing with her other. She wanted a dinner that was hot, strong, and filling. Any one of those. Now, for question 2 then, okay, they will give you this extract. Sorry, excuse me, somebody's trying to join. Also, if you have any questions, you'll just have to interrupt me because I can't see you. So anyone who's raising their hands, you just have to unmute yourself and just talk to me. Just interrupt me. Otherwise, as my class knows, I can just keep talking. So here in this line 6 to 14, okay, how does the writer use language to describe Rosabelle's bus journey home? Okay, so it's quite a tricky bit, this, I thought. Okay, how is her bus journey described? So look at words and phrases, which we know could be adjectives, they could be nouns, they could be adverbs. Language features and techniques like similes, metaphors, personification, and the sentences. So you could have short, simple sentences that are direct to the point, or you could have longer, complex sentences. You could have the fact that there are a pair of dashes. You could have the ellipses here, which is our run-on sentences. Okay, and the number of complex sentences also, which perhaps indicate her long, ongoing journey on the bus, the repetition of this journey every day after work. So when we look at this, then the first thing you should do, especially if you're aiming, 5 and above, which you all are, you should give an overview. Although it might be tempting to say, oh, the first thing that one of the language features that are used are adjectives to describe the street as blurred and misty. Okay, fine. The street was blurred and misty, but unless you can explain the effect of that, what does it tell us about Rosabelle's bus journey? Unless you can explain it and link it to the question, telling the examiner that 2 adjectives are used there is pointless. You have to give an overview first. So language is used to describe Rosabelle's bus journey home as horrible, as uncomfortable, because she doesn't enjoy it. That's how her bus journey home is described. She's uncomfortable, she's wet, her skirt is coated with grease and mud, there's a sickening smell in the bus, okay? Everybody has the same expression, like they're just exhausted after a day of work, everybody is mindless, almost everybody is there's no hope in anyone. You know, they're all in the same situation. She's feeling stifled, and the people, their meaningless faces are just merging into one another. So the first thing you do before you start diving into specific words and phrases is give an overview. Language here is used to describe Rosabald's bus journey home as uncomfortable, as undesirable, as, you know, in a negative way. Okay, it's something that she does not enjoy. And then you would focus in on specific examples. On the sheet that I have emailed out to you, and again, don't worry if you haven't got it, or this is a sample paper I'm going to give people. Bear with me 1 second. On the sheet that I emailed out to you, what I did was I gave you some opening things. So I've given you an overview, okay, of this. So Rosabald's looking out the window, and the first thing as a reader we should notice is that she's inside the bus, but her focus is external to the bus. So the outside and the inside are being linked. Okay. And when she's looking at the street, which is blurred and misty because of the rain, the light striking on the window panes of the bus turned the dullness to opal and silver. So you get these adjectives that are luxurious, that are kind of linked to expensive and luxury and comfort. The jewelers' shops that she can see outside the windows suddenly seem like fairy palaces. So you've got also that idea of this fictional um, princess world almost. And it's like what she sees outside reflects the life that she wants, but actually inside the bus is the reality. Okay. Where she's uncomfortable, there's a smell inside, it's oozing out of everybody. You've got that onomatopoeic word there as well. She's feeling stifled, physically stifled, but metaphorically, she's perhaps stifled as well in her life, in the lack of routine. So what I've got for you here is a sample answer. Okay, but I've got dot, dot, dot ellipses for you to finish them off. So the writer uses language to contrast the outside world with the inside of the bus. That's my overview. Language is used to contrast what's outside with the inside. The outside world seems to represent her hopes and dreams. The adjectives opal and silver to describe the change from the dullness of the window pane suggests. What does opal and silver suggest? Well, tell me that they suggest luxury, it suggests expense, comfort, all the things that she doesn't have access to being working class. The metaphor of the jeweler's shops being transformed into fairy places indicates, okay, that this is a fantasy world for her. Okay, this is her hopes, her dreams. However, the inside of the bus represents her reality and her life. The adjectives black and greasy with mud describe her clothing. They suggest that her life is dark, full of dirt. You could even use these colors and these adjectives to describe with opal and silver the contrast of these two colors, what's outside and what's inside the bus, which is her reality, which is what she's living with. The use of the senses, what can she can see outside, but also what she can smell inside, which is really, really vivid. You know, the sickening smell, the alliteration there. You've got the onomatopoeic word oozing, like it's coming out of every pore. What does that imply? The verb stifled, okay, refers to not only her physically feeling stifled, but also metaphorically, she feels restricted and stifled in the life that she's living in. And there's also a metaphor to describe the people as, you know, all these faces turning into one meaningless, staring face. Everyone's merging into each other. Everyone looks the same. And that implies and indicates that perhaps that's how she's feeling about her life. One day is merging into another, blending into another. There's no change. There's no hope. There's no place to dream. Okay. So when you are looking at a question like this, how does a writer use language to describe Rosabald's bus journey home? You always give an overview first. Sorry, somebody's trying to join. So you give an overview first and then, okay, you move on from that. You then focus in on specific words and phrases. Do not ever be tempted to just pick the words and phrases and do one paragraph on the adjectives opal and silver, another paragraph on the fairy places. Another, that's not how it should be. It should be one comprehensive response. It's only 8 marks. It should be no more than 10, maximum 12 minutes, depending on how long you have spent reading. Okay. But the first thing you should do is read first. The other thing you shouldn't, and I know you've probably heard this many, many times, but the other thing you shouldn't do is explain what the quote means. So you shouldn't be saying opal means silver is a bright color. Yeah. Okay. We know that. We know the English language. Why is that relevant? Why is the brightness of silver and the luxurious color of opal that you get in pearls, why are they relevant here? Why, what we know what fairy palaces are. They're places, sorry, um, where fairies live. Why is that relevant here? What are fairies? They're not real. They don't exist. They're part of a fantasy world. What does that tell us? That, Rosabelle has massive hopes and dreams that she will probably never achieve just because of her lower class circumstances. And you get this then contrasted with the juxtaposed with the inside of the bus, the outside and the inside. Outside hopes and dreams, inside is her reality. So I have got a response for you here, which I will show you. And this is what I want you to look at. After these ellipses, this is where I've got the explanations. Okay. And I'm not explaining what the adjective opal means and what the adjective silver means. Okay. I'm explaining the overall effect of these. So the writer uses the bus journey to contrast the outside world with the inside of the bus. The outside world seems to represent Rosabelle's hopes and dreams. The adjectives opal and silver to describe the change from the dullness of the window panes suggests her longing for a life of glitter and brightness, of brighter, lighter colours instead of the dark colours currently representing her life, shown in the adjectives black and greasy with mud. So all I've done is I've taken those colours and adjectives and I've linked them to here. The metaphor of the jeweller's shop transformed into fairy places suggests these shops symbolize a dreamlike fantasy, a world full of sparkle, magic, and enchantment, a world that is entirely, completely unobtainable for a girl like her. However, the inside of the bus represents her reality and her life. The use of the senses and verbs sickening, smell, oozing represents the unpleasantness of her life and how unhappy she is in her life compared to the freedom and beauty she sees outside of the bus. This unhappiness is oozing into all parts of her life. The verb stifle refers to her claustrophobic feelings that she feels suffocated in her life too, smothered by the mundane normality, and she longs for a difference, a change. The metaphor to describe the people as one meaningless staring face implies their features are indistinguishable. They are blurred into a single being that represents the hollow, pointless existence they all seem to share, her included, that there is no hope, there is no movement in this life. Okay. And as you can see, that's not a massive answer. You would need maybe 4 different techniques, words or phrases, language techniques, or a sentence. Okay. And you would kind of focus on how that shows Rosabelle's bus journey. Okay. Anything that doesn't refer to a bus journey, the fact that she unbuttoned she unbuttoned the 2 buttons on her coat. How does that represent her bus journey? Well, if you can link it to the fact that she's feeling stifled, use it. But you've got the actual word stifled. So you wouldn't need to mention that she unbuttons it. Okay. So really only focus and zoom in on what does this show me about her journey? Blurred and misty doesn't show anything apart from the fact that it's raining. But opal and silver do. Jewelers' shops, which are fairy palaces. The black and greasy mud contrasting to the opal and silver. The smell, oozing, um, stifled feeling, and the meaningless staring faces. Okay, and there is a sample 8-mark answer for you from this paper. Now, question 3 then, and a lot of people really struggle with question 3. And what I find is that people tend to do is they tend to look at every paragraph and they explain every paragraph. So how has a writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? And then they will get this and they will say, here in this opening paragraph, we're focused on the fact that Rosabelle is coming home from work on the bus. Here, she then describes her journey home. Then she thinks about what happened in the day and the people that she met. Then she remembers a couple, a man and a woman, and the woman ended up buying a hat and the man paid for it. And you're literally just telling me what's on the screen, or you're telling the examiner what is on your paper in front of you. Okay. But the question doesn't ask that. It doesn't ask you to rephrase word for word what's happening. The text is from the beginning of a short story. How has the writer structured it to interest you? Why are you interested in it? What has the writer done in the way they've written it to interest you? Now, each of these bullet points can be taken individually. What the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning. So you always are focused on the beginning. And at the beginning, the writer will do one of 3 things. They will either focus you on character. And actually, we are focused on character here because we learn about Rosabelle. The writer will either focus on a setting, or the writer will actually focus on a situation. And in this opening, the writer does two of those things. We are introduced to Rosabal, our character. We learn so much about her, her situation and her circumstances just from the opening. And even the fact that she's traveling on a bus. Okay, so that's our opening. How and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops. There will be something in there, I guarantee you. It doesn't mean you look up from paragraph to paragraph. What do we have from the beginning that changes somewhere in the middle? And it's up to you to spot that. And then it says any other structural features that interest you. So anything else you notice, but what they really mean there is if you have mentioned the beginning of the source, you have to mention the end. How does the source end? Does it link us back to the beginning? Is it a circular structure? Is our understanding of Rosabal's situation furthered by the end? Are we left with more questions? Is it a cliffhanger? You need to be able to pinpoint and pick that out. So what I've got for you here is 3 sentences, okay? And I'm just going to ask you, if you've got a copy of the worksheet that I've given you, these sentences are on there. If you haven't, it's not a problem. You just need a pen and paper. You would write these in 3 short paragraphs. At the beginning, the writer focuses our attention on what do we see at the beginning of that extract? And you need to have short quotes as well to support that. We then shift in time as Rosabal experiences a flashback. So once we are introduced to Rosabal here, and she's on the bus, she began to then think of all that happened during the day, and she has a flashback because the rest of this is all written in the past tense. So that is a structural feature. Okay, so at the beginning, the writer focuses our attention on Rosabal, her situation, her circumstances. We then shift in time as Rosabal experiences a flashback to. Tell me what she experiences a flashback to. Okay, how do we know what goes on in that flashback? How is it told to us as readers? Okay, and then in the final line, so this is my ending of their exchange, the girl tells her boyfriend she's going to wear her new hat when I come out to lunch with you. This reminds us of the beginning when. So how does the end of this extract link back to the beginning when we first introduced to Rosabal? Because it does link back, okay? I want you just to spend 5 minutes jotting up some ideas, okay? And then I'll ask for people to contribute, tell me what they've got, and then I will show you what I have got. I think it's really important that you try it because we can all fall into the trap of literally explaining what happens in each paragraph, and that will not get you above a grade 3. Okay, so at the beginning, the shift in time to a flashback, and then how does the end link back to the beginning? Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Just 5 minutes then, just jot some notes. You don't even need to have quotes, not for this session anyway. Obviously, in the exam you do. Okay.
Just
And
a quick question.
yes,
Do I need the extract?
right. Did you join late? If you give me your name and who your teacher was, I'll try and forward it to you now.
Name is Jonas Mohammed, and my teacher is Julie.
Julie, Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll forward it. Anybody else who hasn't got the extract that I emailed out at the start of the session? Okay, so Jonas, I'll just email it out to you now. I'll just have to, sorry, stop sharing for 1 minute. If everyone else can just bear with me while I do this. Okay, Jonas, that's just gone out to you. Can everyone see the screen? Have I shared it?
No.
No. Typical. Right, is it there now?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to get some notes down. Please try and put down anything that you think is relevant. And then when I share my ideas with you, you might think, yeah, Raksana, I already had that. I got that. Or actually, I missed that. That's interesting. Okay, but you won't get it unless you try it. So just bullet points. If you haven't got the extract, you don't even need quotes. I will show you what the quotes should look like in the sample answer and how you should kind of embed them. Okay, let's have some ideas then. Anybody want to share? Don't be shy, okay? Just say what you need to say. Um,
Shall I start?
yeah, that'd be good. Leila, if you want to start.
Yeah. The beginning of the source would introduce us with Roosevelt to show us to explain how a middle class people live at that time.
Right,
She had
lower
a
class.
little
Sorry, just to stop you, it's lower class. It's
lower
written in,
class. Sorry,
yeah. So
sorry.
always, if the information is in the text box at the top, make sure you use it. She's lower class. She's not middle class. Okay.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Um, she's working class.
yeah. Live at that time.
Yep.
She had little tea, and she was dreaming of the a good tea, but she had to buy a bunch of violet, so that and that reason she had to have a small tea. That shows
Okay.
how little money she had. She had and
And that's
uh,
enough. It's enough to say that, Layla, and not even beyond that. Personally, if I've got 10 minutes in the exam, I'm not going to even mention the fact that she's got violets, that she's paid for violets. And I would just say at the beginning, the writer focuses our attention on the character of
really.
Rosabelle. Yeah, I'd say she focuses on our character on Rosabelle and Rosabelle's situation, which we learn is working class or lower class from the fact that she has such a small dinner. And she even says she would have sold her soul for a more hot, warm meal. And she travels on a bus, okay, which at that time, okay, was a sign of the times. Thank you. Anybody want to do the shift in time as Rosabelle experiences a flashback? What are we going to say there about the flashback? How do we learn about the flashback? How is it shown to us as readers?
when she remembers the woman and the man coming to the shop.
Good. Yeah, she does remember, but how do we, as readers, know about that? How does the writer write about that time when the man and the woman come into the shop? If I show you this, if I show you the extract, so she talks about the other girl. There'd been a girl, a man had come in with her. How do we, how are we shown this entire meeting? What technique does the
because she
writer
says
use?
that because she says in the text that she began to think.
Right. Okay. So we know this is a flashback, but how is this flashback written for us? How is it written? Can you
Dialogue.
dialogue? Brilliant. And if you have an extract with dialogue in it, dialogue is a structural feature always. Okay. So the use of dialogue. So you're absolutely right. She has a flashback. She has this memory, but then this memory, this flashback is the reader is informed of it through direct speech, which is unusual because it should be perhaps reported speech or just a memory of it, but we get the exact words and phrases. Okay. Any ideas why dialogue is used then? Why the exact words and phrases of this exchange are used? What's the purpose of that?
That bring the reader inside the story. That can relate reader with the story very well.
Okay, so it kind of gives us all dimensions, doesn't it? It tells us about the girl. It tells us a lot more about Rosabelle. It tells us more about Harry as he's talking. Okay, we'll leave that there. What about the final line? When the girl tells her boyfriend she's going to wear her new hat when I come out to lunch with you. How does that phrase, how does that ending link back to the beginning?
If there is no one.
Sorry?
Because she
Of
was
how
she
limited
wa-
she is.
you need to choose,
Sorry.
Roxana.
I don't know who's talking because I don't know some of the learners who are here. I don't know names, you see, because they're new to me. Should we have the hands up then?
Yes. Okay.
Layla, I'm going to give somebody else a chance because you did say
Yeah,
something
that's
about
why.
being.
Yeah,
Faiza,
that's why.
yes. You're on you mute.
I
Yeah.
said yes. I said the final is about food, lunch, but it is to emphasize the difference between the two worlds. The rich girl is getting ready and preparing herself for a lunch out with her rich boyfriend, while Rosabelle is not able to afford more than a scone and a cup of tea, and she's ready to sacrifice her soul for a good dinner.
Brilliant. Spot on. 10 out of 10. And that's exactly it. The ending where the rich girl is saying, I'll wear it out to lunch. That links, it's the theme of food, isn't it? It starts off with Rosabelle telling us how hungry she is. She hasn't had enough, especially after a hard day. She probably doesn't even have lunch, Rosabelle, and she's talking about her dinner. But it ends with this wealthy girl with this really expensive, lovely, luxurious hat. She's not even leaving it for a special occasion. She's just going to wear it while she goes to lunch. And it emphasizes the differences between the rich girl and the poor girl through this mention of food, through the link of food. Well done, well spotted. Okay, so at the beginning, this is exactly what we've just said. The writer focuses our attention on the thoughts of Rosabelle, who's travelling home after a hard day's work in a hat shop. And please, please, please try and embed quotes and keep them as short as possible. We learn that she would have sacrificed her soul for a good dinner. And it's important that we mention the fact that she's hungry because we talk about it here at the end. So this immediately establishes the main character as a lower class girl who is poor and hungry despite how hard she works. So it establishes character and the theme of perhaps hunger and poverty. We then shift in time as Rosabelle experiences a flashback. So that's another structural feature, to all that had happened during the day. So if you're thinking, well, Roxana, how would I show a quote that shows the flashback? You would find a phrase that tells us because we know it's a flashback. How do we know? There is words and phrases that show us. So she experiences a flashback to all that happened during the day with the focus narrowing to her serving a girl with beautiful red hair. The rest of the extract is in dialogue, which shows the reader Rosabal's public role as a subservient girl. And with her earlier private thoughts and this external dialogue, the reader sees her full character, the depth of her personality, her problems, her worries and concerns. Basically, we get the image of her fully rounded character through these earlier thoughts, the beginning, and this dialogue here. We learned so much about Rosabal. If you've got time, you can even go into detail about something that we learn about her. Perhaps the fact that she's desperate for a sale. You know, she goes running up to the and checking on this final hat that they've got, or the fact that she feels a sudden ridiculous feeling of anger. So it shows us that, you know, her inner thoughts, but then are contrasted with her external thoughts, because she feels this sudden internal anger, but then praises the woman as well, and then talks to the woman as well. It's exquisitely finished off inside, madam. So she doesn't let her inner feelings show on her external face, because again, it's to do with the differences in the class and the divide and the fact that she is subservient and serving other people. So we get an image of her fully rounded character. And in the final line, just like, was it Faiza who said, really summed it up nicely. In the final line of their exchange, the girl tells her boyfriend she's going to wear her new hat when I come out to lunch with you. This reminds us of the beginning when Rosabal was hungry. So the structure emphasizes how very different the two girls are. If you have time, you could then go into detail. It emphasizes the differences in their class. The working girl who has access to breakfast, lunch, dinner, as many snacks as she wants, and then Rosabal, who doesn't even have a sufficient amount to eat after a hard day's work. This upper class woman who probably has never worked a day in her life has all the food she can want, and Rosabal, despite working long hours, she's paid so little that she doesn't even have enough to eat. So it really emphasizes the differences in the women. Okay, even the dialogue emphasizes the differences in them. You know, you've got Rosabal with her beautiful red hair, and she puts the hat. She puts the hat on. Sorry, you've got the beautiful girl with the red hair, and she puts the hat on Rosabal, who's got brown hair. So the contrast between the dull and the meek, and the beautiful and the exotic. Okay, so just moving on very quickly, then I am aware that this class is finishing at 8 and I haven't even got on to question 5 yet. Question 4 then. So question 1, you should spend about 5 minutes on. Question 2 and 3 are both worked 8 marks. You should spend 10 minutes on each, okay? As a combined response, they only add up to 16 marks. 8 and 8 is 16. That is still far less than this 20. Okay, it is going to be very, very hard for you to get but you can, to get the full 8 out of 8 marks. Okay, but if you spend longer, it is easier to get the 20 marks in this question, because it is how far do you agree? Okay, so it's a bit more of a response where you can give your own thoughts and opinions as long as you can support them from the text. Whereas this is more technical. These questions are more technical. So yes, spend the time on them. But if you find yourself spending upwards of 15 minutes on question 2 and 15 minutes on question 3, move on. It is not worth a combined 16 marks, whereas this one on its own is worth 20. And you might have only left yourself 10 minutes for this one. Okay, so no more than 10 on question 2, no more than 10 on question 3, 5 on question 1. That's your 25 minutes. Just say 5 minutes reading. Okay, that's full 30 minutes. That should leave you a good 20 minutes on this question for 20 marks, 22, 23 minutes. So you can really get to grips with it. Now, for this question then, again, you need to focus on where they direct you from line 19 to the end. You can refer briefly to other sections of the text beyond that, but they want the evidence and the quotes from here onwards. Okay, if you refer to other aspects and not the ones mentioned, okay, you can't get above a level, upper level 2, and I will show you the mark scheme. Okay, and that works out to be, you know, maximum of 10 out of 20 marks, no matter how good your response is. Okay, so they will give you a statement, a controversial statement sometimes. A student said, this part of the story set in the hat shop shows that the redhead girl has many advantages in life, and I think Rosabal is right to be angry. To what extent do you agree? Well, yes, it does show the red-haired girl has many advantages. We know some of the advantages that she has. The fact that she arrives in a carriage, the fact that, you know, she refers to Harry about the hat that she wants, the fact that she's even shopping for a hat when Rosabelle hasn't got enough money for food, for dinner.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know, she can afford to be fussy. The fact that it is a new hat that she's bought, but she isn't saving it for a special occasion like to wear to the races or to wear to a wedding. She's just going to wear it to lunch. It's an ordinary day. She's out with Harry, you know, she's bought this hat, but it's just a hat she's wearing out to lunch. But this is the other part of it. Yes, the red-haired girl has many advantages in life, and these are contrasted to the disadvantages that Rosabelle experiences. Okay, the long hours she works for the lack of money. Um, I think Rosabelle is right to be angry. So that's the bit you've really got to get your teeth into. Is she right to be angry? Why is she right to be angry? Is she right to be angry with this girl? Is it her fault? Or what does this girl exactly do to elicit Rosabelle's anger? To what extent do you agree? In your response, consider your own impressions of the red-haired girl. So what do we think of her? There's several things to note here. Although she's an upper-class girl, she's not mean to Rosabelle. She's not rude to Rosabelle. She treats Rosabelle as much as anyone, you know, as kindly as anyone could treat a woman who works in a shop. She even at one point puts the hat on Rosabelle's head. You know, if she was worried that Rosabelle was lower class, you might say, oh, don't put the hat on her head. You know, she hasn't washed her hair, or she could show those class differences, but she doesn't. So our impressions of the red-haired girl. Evaluate how the writer conveys Rosabelle's reactions to the red-haired girl. So conveys means how the writer shows us Rosabelle's methods. Conveys means the language features, the words and phrases. So how is it written? Which methods are used to show us Rosabelle's reaction? And then you just give examples to the text. Now, if we're looking at Rosabelle's reactions, okay, up until this point, so line 17 is here. Sorry, what was it? Line 17, 19, sorry. So from here, okay. And here we don't really get much about Rosabelle's reactions. We've got Harry talking, we've got the girl, have you any hats like that? You know, then she remembers oh, 1 minute, and she goes and gets it. It's only when the girl put the hat on Rosabelle, let me see how it looks on you, okay? And Rosabelle turned to the mirror, placed it on her brown hair, faced them again. The girl talks. We don't get any ideas about Rosabelle's impressions, Rosabelle's thoughts and feelings, because it's all in direct speech. It's only in line 40. A sudden, ridiculous feeling of anger had seized Rosabelle. And you've got to look at that. Is Rosabelle right to feel this anger? She longed to throw the lovely, perishable thing in the girl's face. She wanted to throw it at her. And to hide those emotions, to hide that reaction, she bent over the hat, flushing red, turning red. Okay. And then tries to cover it up by saying it's exquisitely finished off inside, madam. Okay. So your question is, how does a writer show Rosabelle's reaction? What are our impressions of the red-headed girl? Oh, not that one. That's not what I wanted to show you first. On this sheet that I have sent out to you earlier, okay, and if you haven't got it, don't worry. I've got some sample, let's try and get it all on one page, answers for you, okay? Sample opening sentences for you, should I say. So we would always start this question with a response like, I agree, disagree, both agree and disagree, okay? So if I'm writing this, I would say, you know, I both agree and disagree that Rosabelle is right to be angry at this point. Okay. And then I'm going to show why I agree and disagree. Okay. So although Rosabelle's anger is understandable, it's not really fair, even though the redhead girl does appear to have many advantages in life. And then you contrast the wealth. You contrast the fact that this girl came in a carriage, Rosabelle is traveling on the bus. This girl is going out for a lunch with her boyfriend. Rosabelle doesn't even have enough to eat. The girl has all the time in the world to luxuriously shop for a hat. Rosabelle spends her whole day working on her feet, trying to please customers. Okay, you can even contrast the looks. So this girl's wealthy lifestyle is reflected in her look. She's got this beautiful red hair. She's got these green eyes. She looks exotic. If I show you the extract again, when Rosabelle is describing her, A girl with beautiful red hair, white skin, and eyes the color of that green ribbon shot with gold that they had had from Paris last week. So her eyes are being compared to this ribbon that they had that's come from Paris. Okay, from a foreign place, and it's luxurious, it's green, gold, and that's what her eyes are compared to. And then you've got Rosabelle, and we only get a description of what Rosabelle looks like when she put it on her head. And we've known Rosabelle turned to the mirror and placed it on her brown hair. And again, that idea of brown, mud, dirty boots, the black, you know, the lack of Rosabelle's looks, perhaps, compared to the exquisiteness of this woman. And the hat almost seems to represent this woman and the luxury in her life and the beauty in her life. Okay. And that's perhaps what seizes Rosabelle's anger. So you could contrast wealth, contrast looks. I think Rosabelle is envious and maybe even resentful, which is why her anger is understandable. Okay. When Rosabelle tries on the hat, okay, she feels this ridiculous anger. And perhaps it's because at the moment that the hat is put on Rosabelle's own head, their worlds, their lives, their paths that are very, very different, the lower class and the upper class, they cross, don't they? This hat that should only belong on the head of a wealthy person, on the head of this beautiful girl with the red hair, is actually put on Rosabelle's. And in that moment, their worlds collide almost. There's a crossover through this hat. And it's that. I must have that. And she smiled at Rosabelle. It suits you beautifully. And that's when she feels this moment of anger, wanting to throw it at her, because that hat represents everything Rosabelle doesn't have in her life that she wants. This outside fantasy world where jewelers' shops looks like fairy palaces and opal and silver is glittering outside the bus windows, but inside the bus, it's a sickening smell oozing that makes her feel stifled. Okay, so how would I write this out then? I'm sorry I haven't got time to give you time to practice yourself, because I'm really aware it's 7:30 now. So I would say I both agree and disagree that Rosabelle is right to be angry. Although Rosabelle's anger is understandable, it's not really fair, even though the red-haired girl does appear to have many advantages. She arrives in a carriage to go hat shopping, which tells us she's wealthy, and she has a well-dressed boyfriend. These are all outward signs of success. She's also attractive, and the writer's use of colour to describe her, beautiful red hair and white skin, and eyes the colour of green ribbon shot with gold, implies she's also radiant, vivacious, exotic. This is in direct contrast to the brown-haired Rosabelle, who can only dream of being like this. She has everything that Rosabelle doesn't have, and I think this makes Rosabelle jealous because she recognizes how unfair life is. Now, what I've highlighted in yellow is this bit of the question. Evaluate how the writer conveys Rosabelle's reactions. How do we know? What methods did the writer use? The method is color. What does this color imply? Okay, and the use of color here as well. I think Rosabelle is envious and maybe even resentful, which is why her anger is understandable. When Rosabelle tries on the hat, the key sentence, "Let me see how it looks on you," is significant, because just for one moment, their lives overlap. In a way, almost, Rosabelle is being mocked with a symbol of another, much better life. But this is not deliberate. So Rosabelle perhaps feel mocked with a symbol of another better life that she knows she can never have. She knows isn't within her grasp. She knows it isn't possible. And perhaps that's why putting that hat on her head for those 30 seconds makes her feel so angry. But this is not deliberate, which is why her sudden ridiculous feeling of anger is not fair on the girl. The adjective sudden implies that Rosabelle's anger comes out of nowhere. Rosabelle has no control over it, and ridiculous suggests it is unreasonable to the point of being silly. Her anger is unreasonable. Okay, the girl hasn't done anything to deserve it. If anything, she's put the hat on Rosabelle, perhaps in a kind gesture. And again, depending on time, you'd explain all that in detail. And again, methods that the writer uses, the adjective, the use of the word sudden, the ridiculous. The girl isn't unpleasant or mean to her, so Rosabelle is not right to be angry, and she herself acknowledges this when she bent over the hat, flushing. The verb flushing tells the reader that she's embarrassed by her reaction. She recognizes that there's nothing she can do about the girl having all these advantages in life and her having none of them. The girl is a product of her upbringing in the same way that Rosabelle is, and the girl is not to blame for the class divisions in society. So Rosabal is not right to be angry just because the girl has more advantages, because this is neither of their fault. They are both victims, if you like, or they're both products of their upbringing. She's a product of the upper class upbringing, and Rosabal is a product of the working class upbringing. Okay, so take these. What are your impressions of the red-headed girl? What are your impressions of Rosabal? Okay, how do we know them? How are we told? What methods, what words or phrases are used? Don't forget, in question 4, you can use answers from question 2 and 3, as long as you fit them in, as long as they fit into this line. Okay, um, especially when it comes to structure and you're talking about, you know, in the flashback and in the dialogue, this is what we learn. You can copy out sections from that and fit it in here. Okay, when Rosabal is envious. Okay, again, this is a brief outline. Okay, but this is what a sample answer would look like. Okay, you just add more detail
Just a
to
quick
it.
question. Is that
Yes,
is that on the cover learn?
this is not on Kovlan. This is a PowerPoint that I have put together just for this session, but I will email it out to everyone and I will also put it out on Kovlan. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you will get access to all of this, all my resources, everyone who's, as long as I've got a copy of your email address, and I will also put it on Kovlearn as well. Now, I've only got half an hour and I've talked and talked and talked. So I just want to go on to question 5, which needs to be given sufficient time. Question 5, as you know, is worth just as much as question 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you get an hour for those questions. The exam guidelines give you 45 minutes for this. Okay, now I would never say to you, do the description question. Don't do the narrative, only because you might get a descriptive task that's really, really difficult. So you need to be prepared to do both. As a teacher of 18 years, though, my instinct is to say to you that in the 45 minutes, so that's 5 minutes planning, 5 minutes checking through, okay, which leaves you 35 minutes writing time, is to do a description, because it's very, very hard to write a narrative with a beginning, middle, and an end, and some sort of structure and dialogue and description in 35 minutes, whereas a description is more doable. So this is a question from this exact same exam paper. Okay, describe a journey by bus as suggested by this picture. Now, what you don't do is say, in this picture you can see, in this picture I can see. It's not asking you to write about this image. It's saying describe a journey suggested by this picture. You don't even have to use this at all, as long as you describe a journey by bus. Rosabal was in the bus. Okay, we've got a description of her, what she sees outside of the bus, and the way the inside of the bus is brought to life as well through the sense of smells. You could do the exact same. You could write sections about the inside of the bus and contrast it to what's happening outside of the bus. Okay, as long as you're not directly copying words and phrases. So there's 2 ways that you would do this. You would zone the image. Okay, when we're talking about zoning the image, and again, this is on the PowerPoint, but I haven't got time to read it to you. What you would do, okay, is choose 4 or 5 parts of the picture which you think you could write a paragraph about, and draw a box around each one. This is your 5 minutes plan. Okay, it can be useful to choose a mixture of small details which you can zoom in on as well, and larger features. So you've got to zone the image, put it in zones. If you want to describe something which isn't in the picture, draw a box in the margin and make a note about what will go in that paragraph. Okay, so if you're thinking, well, on the bus usually you have this, this, and this, I can't see it there, doesn't mean that you can't write about it. Do use your imagination. Okay, around each box, write a few words or phrases you might use to describe this area. Think about the mood or atmosphere you want to create. What is the bus like? Is it hustling and bustling and loud and noisy and crowded and chaotic? Or is it quiet and peaceful? Okay, and empty. Number the boxes in the order you will write about them. Think about a logical order and how you will connect them, because that is the mark for structure. So for example, here's one I did. I decided, okay, that I was going to start off here on this girl. I was going to focus in on this young lady here, okay, and I was going to start my paragraph 1 with her and paragraph 5 with her. I was going to start and end with her, okay, because that's a structural effect then, and I've got my structure sorted. Second paragraph though, she's looking out of the window. So after I've described her, I'm going to describe what's out of the window. What does she see outside? Okay, then I'm going to move from the outside back inside, and I'm going to focus on her listening in on this conversation. And that's quite a clever way in your description to get some direct speech in there as well, some dialogue. Okay, and you can describe how this woman sounds, what you can hear. Remember, descriptive writing is all about the senses, what you can hear, what you can smell, what you can touch, what you can taste, what you can feel. And I'm going to really zoom in on this woman here, okay, from her perspective. And then, okay, I'm going to move on from her and I'm going to zoom in on this button here, which is the stop button that we press, the ping, the ding, or whatever you want to call it, when somebody presses it and the bus makes a stop. Okay, and then I'm going to end it with this character here leaving. And inside each of these boxes, I would write words and phrases. Okay, again, you do not need to do it like this. This is just one way that I am suggesting that you could. So here then, okay, obviously your plan wouldn't be like this. This is a detailed plan because I want you to, it's just, it's help you revise. It's to give you some ideas. So I would start off number one with this girl, the girl, and I would describe her straight, rigid back as she sits on the bright red fabric seat that masks the stains and wear and tear from the hundreds of passengers that sit on them daily. So straight away, I'm describing the seat that she's sitting on. I'm describing her straight, rigid back. By saying that she's got a straight, rigid back suggests that she's uncomfortable, that she's something's going on in her life. Okay. I've described her expression as pensive, which means thoughtful, worrying. Her hands are running through her open hair in frustration. So again, we get more and more detail as the description goes on. She's frustrated. Her eyes are shifting between the time on the phone and staring out the window, almost like she's eager to be somewhere. She's agitated. She's uncomfortable. And then as she looks, she's staring out the window. I would then describe the window smeared with toddler-sized hand marks. And then I'd end the paragraph with her gaze looking outside of the window and linking the description to what's outside in the next paragraph. And outside then is the view. And in my description, the view is of brightly lit shops, all decorated in festive colours of red and green tinsel. An elf on on a shelf in one window display. So without telling the examiner it's Christmas time, I am showing through my description, through my words and phrases. There's brightly lit shops, sorry. There are festive colours of red and green tinsel. There's an elf on a shelf in a window display. There's a blow up Santa waving with a crazy, scarily wide smile. Okay, and you've got the juxtaposition there. Santa's supposed to be friendly, welcoming, and then you've got the, because it's a blow up Santa, this scary expression on his face. You've got people scurrying about, carrying bags full of shopping. You've got the wind blowing, an umbrella turned out inside out as someone grapples to straighten it. And then the girl inside, she imagines being that carefree. She imagines having the freedom to forget and just enjoy the season. And then her attention is caught by a pleading voice, a voice that's mimicking the way she's feeling inside, and a voice that makes her stomach churn with nerves. Okay. And that's the voice of this woman inside the bus. So you've gone from inside the bus to describing the seats and her feelings and the smeared window to outside the bus to back inside of the bus again through this sound. So you've got your senses as well. And this time it's what she can hear, the conversation, the woman in front sobbing quietly into the phone, her heartbreaking conversation barely heard over the din and noise inside the bus. Add some one-sided dialogue. Because you can only hear her side, you could add some direct speech where she said, no, please don't do this. Give me another chance. Whatever you want her feeling, whatever you want her saying in her conversation. Is she talking to a boyfriend? Is she talking to her boss? Is she pleading for her job? Is she talking to a loved one who's really unwell? You decide. Add some one-sided dialogue from her view only. Describe her, not just what you can hear, but her head bent down, the tears flowing freely, her thick voice choked with tears. Create a real sense of sadness through her. And then moving on then. So you've got the sound of her talking, and then you've got the stop button, this piercing sharp ping of the stop button. You've got some onomatopoeia here. Okay, a small red button framed inside a yellow casing that's loud enough to be heard over the din. And then when that button is pinged, the sharp breaking, sorry, I've just realized a glaring error I've made here. The sharp breaking of the bus as it jerks the girl in her seat, the same girl from the beginning, okay, jolting her violently, the mobile phone in her hand, nearly slipping out of her hands to the floor. She glances up and sees her stop. And I've kind of tried to link through simple words and phrases. Like here I mention her mobile, but I don't mention it again, but here I do. Sorry, somebody's trying to join. And it's just about these little things that you add in every now and then that link the structure, that create the structure. Because what people tend to do is they write 5 very separate paragraphs, but there's no flow from one paragraph to the next. I have tried to create this flow through the perspective of this girl, what she sees outside of the window, what she hears inside, the sound of the bus and her bus stop, the phone nearly falling out of her hands again. Sorry, somebody's trying to join again. And then I've ended it with the girl again. Okay, she glances up, sees her stop, describe her again. Repeat the image of her straight back from the beginning. This time she's getting up to leave the bus and her hands are in the pocket. She's weaving her way down the bus to the open doors. Describe her hair blowing in the wind in the doorway. Remember, it is Christmas time, it's winter. You've got her hands running in her open hair in frustration while she's sat on the bus. Now the wind is blowing in her hair. Her steps as she leaves the bus. She stands on the solid pavement. This time, describe tension in shoulders and describe her fingers are curled into fists. End by describing her face, like with a determined expression. She purposefully walked off down the street, or with a scared expression, crying, angry. What impression do you want to create? It's a really fine line between a description and a narrative. Okay, but within your description, there's no reason why, through subtle structural links, you can't create a tight, neat structure as long as what you are doing is describing. Okay, the other thing that I get a lot of, and I find a lot of, is instead of describing, people are persuading, and they tend to do a persuasive piece. So, for example, in the last mock that we did, and we had a fishing village. And one of the tasks was to describe a fishing village. People wrote it as if it was an advert, and they were trying to persuade their readers to attend. You know, it's a beautiful fishing village. There are rainbow colored houses, houses colored in rainbow colors of all sorts. And if there's a hustle and bustle, and why wouldn't you want to come here? It's the best place in the world. Okay, it smells a bit horrible down by the harbour, but the people are friendly with wide smiles. There's amazing hotels. That's all descriptive. Yes, amazing and wonderful. These are adjectives. So you are doing the right thing when you're doing that. Rainbow coloured houses, describing them in all that way. But actually what you have to do is talk about the senses as well. What else can you see, smell, touch, taste, feel? And you create an impression without saying it. You show it without telling it. So don't tell me that this fishing village is an amazing place to be. Show me through your words and phrases. Show me through the friendly smiles of the fishermen and through the friendliness of the people on the stalls. Okay, and the fact that there's no litter on the streets, and everybody's walking at a relaxed, leisurely pace. So that's what you've got to do. You've got to describe. You've got to show, not tell. Okay, so that's one way you could do this. Another way to structure a descriptive piece, okay, is through time. Okay, by describing the same scene at different times of the day. Now, something like this is quite tricky to do because it's a still image on a bus with people. You could describe the bus in the morning, describe the bus at lunchtime, and describe the bus at dinner time. But to be honest with you, I can't see much of a difference. In the morning, the bus will be full of people who are on their way to work. At lunchtime, perhaps the bus will be full of, or might be a little bit quieter, but in the evening, the bus will be full of people coming home from work. So really, this would lend itself more to a zoning structure where you take individual things in the picture and write about them. Whereas a picture like this, if they give you that and they ask you to describe, that would lend itself better to a time structure. Okay, where you describe the scene at different times of the day. First, you decide on the time of day you will describe, for example, sunrise, noon, night, and then a quick spider diagram around the image. And it does depend on the image you receive. So here then, this image, in the morning, paragraph 1 is sunrise. What's the sky like? Sky blushes. The sun peers over the mountains, filling the sky with colour. Describe the cabin. It's dark windows. There's no smoke from the chimney because it's early in the morning. People are not awake. The lake is still. It's a mirror. It's a metaphor. There's ripples. Describe the atmosphere. It's gentle. It's calm. It's undisturbed. It's peaceful. It's nature at its best. Noon. Describe the tourists. Walkers looking like tiny ants high on those mountain slopes here. Rowing boats and dinghies. People swimming. So the lake is no longer still. The sun high. Sky picture book blue. So it's a beautiful, amazing sun. Clouds scudding across the sky. So you've got two very, very different descriptions. Paragraph 3, though, sky darkens, the clouds are grey, the water is one massive frown, it's choppy. So it's no longer calm and still. It's no longer busy because of people. Now the weather and the sky seems to be a bit more angry, a bit more ferocious, perhaps because of the wind. Okay. And the point is that you're trying to say something different to paragraph 2 and something different to paragraph 1. So sky darkens, clouds are grey, water is one massive frown, it's choppy, there's a sudden cold wind, maybe there's rains, a downpour, huge drops of rains bouncing into the lake. Describe the noise of the thunder and flashes of lightning. And now those people who look like tiny ants who are leisurely walking are now scurrying for shelter. And then at sunset, back in the evening, it's calm and still again, just like paragraph 1, taking us through to a round structure. The trees glisten with the raindrops like silver beads, linking to paragraph 3 where it rained. The water is flat and mirror-like once again, reflecting the mountains, again linking to paragraph 1. There's an unblemished sky, clear and beautiful, again like paragraph 1. And describe the colours, like a painter with his brush, and everything gradually fading into darkness at night as nighttime falls. Okay, so that is another way you can structure descriptive writing. You can zone it, or you can, depending on the picture, follow a time lapse order. Okay. Now the narrative. Again, I would be in your position. I would be very, very reluctant to do a narrative because you simply, for the amount of things that I know I want to say, I don't know that I could get them in on 35 minutes. So I would always do a descriptive writing piece, unless the descriptive writing question is really difficult, it's really awful, in which case do choose the narrative, keep your options open. Now, this was a really difficult narrative question, okay, and it's one that I particularly disliked. Write a story about two people from very different backgrounds. There's no context here, so you'd have to think about who these people are. If they're from two really different backgrounds, how do they come in contact with each other? How do they make a link? What is their conversation or dialogue going to be about? How am I going to begin it and how am I going to end it? Because don't forget, a narrative has to have a climax. It has to have a peak point of action. It has to have a problem. You start off with the opening, which might be peaceful. You build up to a massive problem or an issue, and then the story ends on a resolution, which might be a cliffhanger, but it still ends. How are you going to do that in 35 minutes? How are you going to write a story about two people from very different backgrounds? And the reason why you've got this question is because you've got Rosabelle from the lower class and you have got the beautiful girl from the upper class. So
I was
when
actually going to say that as well. Like you can write about the class system between two people, and
yes,
then someone being, let's say the person who's poor is more sort of more wiser, more sort of in
perhaps,
that sense,
yeah, yeah,
and then the other person is more of an ignorant person or something like that.
I really like that. I really like that idea, that contrasting of morals and thoughts and even behaviors. And all you would have to do is then create a scenario. When would this person from a lower class meet this upper class person? Because Rosabelle situation happens in a hat
Mm.
shop. Where is
Like,
your setting going
mu-
to be?
probably like obviously the guy who's the lower class is probably homeless, and then
Okay,
they sort of probably cross path
yeah,
somewhere, let's in a certain setting where they just cross path, and then he asks for probably like £10 or something like that,
yeah,
but
yeah,
the person is reluctant to give him £10 because for whatever reason, because he
yeah.
doesn't want to go close to him or even touch him or something like that.
Yeah, I really like that. That's a really strong moral to your story. But bear in mind, you'll have 35 minutes to write it. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. You need to have those ideas. Who are your characters going to be? And stick to one or two characters. Here, it's two people from different backgrounds. So just stick to those two. Stick to one or two settings, one main event. Keep your writing roughly in real time. So what I mean about that is just like, I don't know what your name was that you were just talking, but just like the person who's just given us their scenario, keep it in that moment. So this homeless guy and this wealthier guy, their conversation might last 10 minutes. And that's okay. That's real time. Do not write a story that takes weeks, that happens over weeks, because setting your story over several weeks tends to mean you rush through your story rather than developing one key idea and really zooming in on it. Keep your writing realistic. Of course, you can and should use your imagination, but don't use haunted houses or zombie attacks or supernatural aliens appearing. Okay, they tend to be cliched and out of control. A homeless man and a wealthier man meeting, perhaps even as the wealthier man is stepping into a shop and the homeless man is begging outside this shop, is a realistic scenario which we have all come across. Okay. Also, if you're going to write about something like stabbings and shootings, they can be hard to describe very well if you haven't experienced them. So try and focus on things that are reflective of everyday life. So again, these are my questions. Who are these people? How do their paths cross? What will be the climax of your story? How will you keep your story interesting and engaging, which is what you need to do for a grade 7 or 8 and 9 answer? How will you keep it that way? What's going to happen? So this is just structure that I wrote. Obviously, I wouldn't do this if I was in the exam, but this is just to give you an idea. Now, what I thought was, okay, I've just read this situation with Rosabelle and this rich woman. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same scenario, somebody who's got more money and somebody who hasn't, but I'm not going to focus on money. But I'm going to have my setting on a bus because I've just seen an example of that. And I can't think where anyone from two different backgrounds might meet elsewhere. I didn't have the homeless idea. So I just did them crossing paths on a bus. So then I had to give my wealthier person a reason to be on the bus. So here's a structure you could use. Decide on a main character and a problem they will have. This doesn't have to be a very complicated problem, and it could be either physical or an emotional problem. So my main character, it says your, but I mean mine. My main character is a smartly dressed businessman traveling to work on the bus due to a car breakdown and a taxi strike. I know taxis don't go on strike, okay, buses and trains do, but I couldn't think of any other reason. Okay, and the examiners will be forgiving. You've only got 35 minutes, and it's realistic enough. So, a smartly dressed businessman, he's traveling to work on the bus, his car's broken down, and the taxi's on strike. Next to him, sitting on the seat next to him, is his opposite in every way, a guy dressed in jeans and t-shirt. And I would describe that, what they look like physically, and describe their contrast. He's got long wavy hair and a carefree lifestyle, and he's on his way to sign on. The bus is delayed due to roadworks. The businessman is getting stressed. He's running his hand through his hair. That's how I'm going to show that. He's tapping his foot. He's sighing loudly. Maybe he's staring at his phone every 30 seconds. The younger casual man offers him a chewing gum and strikes up a conversation. And during the conversation, it becomes more apparent that he's on his way to sign on and the businessman is, on his way to work for a really important conversation. Okay, so that's the issue. He's on the bus traveling for work. He's getting stressed because there's a delay on the bus because of roadworks. Decide how you will make this problem worse. Well, the businessman's phone rings. It's work. His 9 a.m. appointment has arrived and the secretary wants to know how long he'll be. He looks towards the front of the bus through the windscreen and his heart sinks. The traffic is at a complete standstill. And you could describe the packed cars, the colourful bumper to bumper cars that you can see through the windscreen. How are you going to make this problem worse still? He worries about letting this client slip away. He hasn't secured a client for the company in over a month. This is his last chance to secure one before he's disciplined for it. 2 strikes and he's out. The casual man tells him, oh, don't worry, take it easy. What's meant to be will be. There are plenty of other jobs. Look at him. He has a new job every month. And the businessman decides he wants to be nothing like him. Okay. Decide on the climax of your story, the tensest part. The office phones again, and the man agonizes over whether to answer the phone or not. At the same time, his boss is bombarding him with messages asking for updates about the meeting. And then in that moment where he's being bombarded left, right, and center, he abruptly stands up, startling the casual man beside him. He's determined to take charge of the situation and not just sit around and accept the obstacles life throws at him, like this passenger is. And then on the ending, he walks to the front of the bus and asks the driver to be let off. And then as he's let off, he starts running towards the office. And as he's running, the casual man is watching from the bus and laughing lightly in disbelief to himself. Okay, and that links the story to people from very different backgrounds. It doesn't say anything about status and wealth, but I've done a background in terms of one's got a job and one hasn't. Okay, and it's a very ordinary scenario. Businessman late to work, but you make it interesting by contrasting it with his complete opposite. Okay, this creates a detailed plan. You can then write up your story, writing a paragraph about each bullet point. Okay, so if you decide to do a narrative, this is what you should go in with in your head as part of your revision. I need to have a main character and a problem, and that would be in your first bullet point. Main character, businessman, problem, late for work. How will you make the problem worse? Traffic jam, meeting with an important client, hasn't had a client in months. How am I going to make the problem worse still? His boss is calling him and the office keeps calling him and the bus has not moved at all. And in the meantime, he's got this other guy jabbering on in his ear about signing on and don't worry, you can get another job. and he's thinking, no, I've sacrificed 5 years of my life here, and I want to make that promotion. I'm not going to just, take my life as easy as he does. Decide on the climax, the tensest part of your story, the man abruptly standing up, taking control of his life, and then running towards the office. Whether he gets there or not, we don't know. The man on the bus laughing at him in disbelief because he's obviously assuming that he's got the better life, the better deal, more enjoyment, more freedom. Okay. And I know it says here, write a story set during a thunderstorm. If it was set during a thunderstorm, you would do the exact same. Okay. If it's a story comparing two people, same. If it's a story written about an unexpected journey, the same. Main character problem, how's the problem going to be worse? How are you going to make it worse still? So that's really building up on the tension. How are you going to decide on the peak of your climax of your story? How are you going to decide the resolution? How is it going to end? Does it end? Does it go in a circular structure? Does it end on a cliffhanger? Okay. Please, please, please do not end it with, then he woke up and it was all a dream. Okay. That they are not realistic endings and they will get you terrible marks as well. Okay. Whether it's a narrative or description, show, don't tell. One way to adapt your writing for imaginative tasks is to show rather than tell. This adds detail to your writing and is much more interesting. So, for example, rather than writing George was sad, you could write George bit his lip hard. A single tear trickled down his grimy cheek. He sniffed and swallowed, feeling a lump in his throat. Okay, and you've got a range of sentences then. You've got a simple sentence, you've got a one-word sentence, you've got another simple sentence, you've got a complex sentence, okay? And all this tells us that George was sad without saying the words George was sad. Another way then is imagery. Another way to show, not tell, is to use metaphors, similes, and personification. Okay, professional writers use these techniques to create effects. You need to aim to do the same in your writing, whether it's a description or whether it is a narrative. Okay, now just on a last point before I let you all go, because I'm really conscious I've talked to you for an hour and a half. In your narrative, please, please, please do not write the majority of your narrative based on a dialogue. It should have dialogue, absolutely, but it should switch between dialogue and description. Okay, it shouldn't just be the opening setting of a bus. You've described the bus, then you have a conversation between this businessman and this man who's signing on, and then you end it with the man leaving the bus, and all in between, the rest of your writing is direct speech. Okay, that work is not effective. Yes, have direct speech, but what your writing should mostly consist of is description, is detailed, even if it's not a description of the setting, a description of the businessman's thoughts and feelings, the casual man's thoughts and feelings. Maybe you've got the businessman's inner thoughts, like we've got Rosabel's, but in your narrative, which you're writing in the third person, you might have the casual man's thoughts and feelings. We don't get the beautiful girl's thoughts and feelings, but you might want to include this in your story. Okay, so that just makes a more rounded story rather than just focusing on what's happening. Are there any questions? I know I've talked to you for a very, very long time. If I have not emailed you, please send me your email address. I will send you all these resources, including my PowerPoint, out to you to help you with your revision. I hope I've helped in some way, that you've learned something. Paula, did you have your hand up? Sorry.
Yeah, somebody asked earlier if you were recording it. Do you normally record your classes? Have them on covered?
Not always. I record them sometimes, and then Graham puts them onto Covlearn for me. Okay, because I don't know how to do that. I have recorded this session and I will get Graham to upload it, but because it's half term, he might not be available to upload it before your exam on Monday. But I will email him tonight and ask him. There are some of my other sessions up there, Paula, that I have taught. I think there's about 3, and it's when people were absent, so I've just recorded my sessions and uploaded them.
Okay, I'll have a look. I have seen one of them before.
Okay, I don't know how useful they'll be to you, but they're there.
There is one revision on paper 1 as well, which is great.
Is that the one
For
that
our
Graham did
class.
with you yesterday?
No, for you.
Oh, the one I've done before.
Yeah, it's great. That one.
Okay.
It's
So there's
a
something else
revision
up
on
there.
paper 1 and 2 together, actually.
Oh, okay. There you go. So have a look at the top of page of Covlearn. There are some stuff. Sumaya, I got your message saying, sorry, Jonas. Sumaya, I got your message with your email address. I'll email that out to you. Okay, so don't worry. Sorry,
Yeah,
Jonas.
thank you. I just wanted to ask as well, do you have any more PowerPoints on question 5? Because I really like the way you explained question 5.
I have some sample answers for question 5 that I have
Yeah.
sent out to my class. So this is what a perfect narrative would look like. This is what a perfect description would look like. I will email them out to everybody. Let me just make a note.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, mine is probably the same question.
Yeah.
It's just the sampled answers.
Okay.
For-
Yeah. So basically, these are questions from real exam papers in the past where I've written out a response. What I've also got, which I'm quite happy to send out to everybody, is some from paper 2 as well. Question 5. I've got something on an article, speech, letter, and they're from past exam papers where I have written out the answer for you, so you can see a model of what it looks like. I will send that out as well, but I'll send that in a separate email so it's not confused with paper 1. That's paper 2. But yeah, I'll get that sent out. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
I need one sample paper of structure question answer, please, because my paper 1 I have not received from teacher. So structure 1, please.
So, Fahima, are you saying that? What do you mean when you say structure? You've not received anything on structure?
No. I got class and my paper 1 I have not received how I am in the structure question. I already sent it to my teacher, paper 1, structure 1, the keynote story. So I'm just waiting for the answer. If you send me any sample of structure question answer, please.
Okay, I'll see what I've got.
Raksana, is it possible I add something? Graham done one beautiful structure revision with us, which is on that is really great to look.
Okay, is that the one that he did on Tuesday, Layla?
No, I don't think he done before. It's just, the structure one is really good one. That is.
So actually, Fahima, if you're struggling with structure and you want to see some examples, on CovLearn, Graham has done some supplementary sessions and he's done one on structure. There is something on question 4 as well for paper 1 and paper 2 on how to answer structure questions as part of your revision. If you can, do have a look at those. I mean, Graham is brilliant. Okay, and it's just always worth looking at another teacher's perspective of teaching. It just might suit your learning style a bit better. So yeah, do look at that. But I will send out my sample answers that I have got to everybody today, and a copy of this PowerPoint as well, so you've got it all. Have I got everybody's email now? Smay, I've got yours. Everybody else has had resources from me. Okay, brilliant. I'm not going to keep you any longer. Okay, I'll stop the recording and I will let you go. Best of luck for Monday. I'm sure you'll all